You might be shopping for a full-size SUV because you want more power under the hood, like the twin-turbo V6 that we find in this Infiniti. Or you might want more room on the inside because you do find a bit more space in some full-size SUVs than you find in the average mid-size crossover. Or you might be looking for a real four-wheel drive system, something that we have on tap in this QX80 as well. Or you might be shopping for towing capacity because on average, full-size SUVs will tow double what you'll find in the average mainstream crossover. This Infiniti is rated for 8,500 pounds of towing capacity. That's healthy, but it's far from class leading because you'll get nearly 10,000 pounds of towing capacity if you choose the right full-size SUV. That's thanks not only to the powerful V6 engine, but also the body-on-frame design. Even if you plan on only regularly towing about 5,000 pounds, you might want to consider something like this over an Infiniti QX80, which is actually rated to tow pretty nicely because of that body-on-frame design. I'm Alex, this is Auto Buyer's Guide, and today we're going to put this through our towing test. The first thing we should do is talk about the engine. Instead of the old 5.6-liter V8, this generation QX80 gets a brand new twin-turbo V6. It's based off of the twin-turbo engine that we find in the rest of the Infiniti lineup, but this has a larger displacement to give us more torque and more low-end torque, which is really what this engine excels at. 450 horsepower is definitely nice. 516 pound-feet of torque is even better when we're talking about towing, especially since this is mated to a new 9-speed automatic transmission with a wider ratio spread, and that torque happens at considerably lower RPMs than the old V8 engine. All very important for towing. On the downside, when it comes to engine braking, there really is no replacement for displacement. So that's what I'm curious about, is how well this is going to control a heavier trailer going downhill. Moving to the business end of the QX80, we have a high-mounted backup camera. That's something I appreciate because in vehicles where the backup camera is really low, it's actually difficult to tell exactly where the hitch and the ball are. This model has a 2-inch receiver, and we have it covered by this little plastic cover, which just fell off right there because I undid those little buckles. We have a 7-pin wiring harness connection over here, 2-inch receiver there, again 8,500 pounds of towing capacity, but importantly, this does not have a factory trailer brake controller. It's worth noting that if you get the Armada, you can get a factory trailer brake controller, we just don't have it in the Infiniti. We do, however, have a ton of different camera angles, and the backup camera, as you can see, does have a hitch alignment line, which is definitely nice. If I put this back in drive, let's explore the other camera views because these are definitely helpful. We have a forward view with side cameras there for the front tires. We have an overall forward view that can be expanded out to 2 screens if you want to. You do that by clicking that button, and then it uses the instrument cluster and the infotainment system display as one big camera display. I find that definitely intriguing. It helps you look around corners, but the view is blocked, obviously, by the steering wheel right there. There's also an invisible vehicle view, which is definitely handy if you want to see exactly what's going on under those front tires. Now, you do have to be driving for a while. As you can see there, that black area suddenly turned into the camera display. It is warning you that it's not live because it is computing that image based on what you've already driven over. And that is obvious if, for instance, I go backwards and forwards here, it actually doesn't show that trailer cover that I did successfully back over without driving on top of. And lastly, we get this kind of cool 3D view where you can twirl the QX80 around and see it from a bunch of different angles. I have to say that Infiniti's done a really good job with this. The different camera views line up pretty nicely, and even though some images like that trailer get distorted in certain views, I think that is kind of handy. You can also choose from predetermined quadrants with these camera options over here. There's moving object detection, and you can just have it sort of spin that car around if you want to. Now, one thing I am noticing is the hitch receiver is actually quite far behind the back of the vehicle. It does make aligning, especially some of these longer pins, just a little bit tricky. And you'll notice that the ball to the back end distance is actually a little bit shorter than in some. To ruin a phrase, the proof is going to be in the backing. Let's see how close those cameras can get me. I will also say that one of the other nice touches with the QX80 is that it has a full air suspension. So you can lower its height, you can back up theoretically, and then raise it up again. Let's see how well that works. Well, that worked about as well as I had expected it to, especially considering this is the first time I've ever backed up to a trailer in this QX80. As I get the QX80 out on the road, the first thing obviously I need to do is dial up the gain on my Prodigy remote brake controller. I am not clear if this is the only remote brake controller, but I have two of them, and they actually work relatively well. If you're in a vehicle and you only occasionally tow, or you trade your trailer around a bunch of different vehicles that don't have integrated trailer brake controllers, this is actually a really handy thing. You basically mount the box to the trailer, you plug the box into the vehicle and then the trailer into the box, and it acts as a brake controller. It has this remote control unit where you can adjust the gain and the boost, and then there's a button to activate the trailer brakes if you want to, if your trailer is swaying, for instance. It actually works relatively well. We haven't had any problems with these over about the last 15 years or so that we've been using this on a bunch of our different trailers. You can also bypass them, of course, if you have a vehicle with an integrated trailer brake controller. So the vehicle I tow most frequently with has one, and so you just plug the trailer straight into the vehicle, bypassing the Prodigy box. It's kind of a handy solution, but you do have to dial up the gain in every vehicle that you're in, and you can also adjust the boost depending on exactly what's going on with the trailer, etc. So on this gravel road, it is a little bit tricky to sometimes dial things up with the trailer before we get out there to the paved road. Now, if you want an integrated trailer brake controller, fortunately, Infiniti does have a provision for wiring already. So there's already a wiring harness right there under the dashboard on the driver's side, so you can just plug in that trailer brake controller without cutting into the wires. And they have separate fuses under the hood. Kind of nice touch there for things like the turn signals on the trailer, the trailer brake controller, the brake line, etc. So it's all separately fused in there. Really nicely done, actually. The exception, of course, though, is the lack of integrated trailer brake controller. Something I think Infiniti definitely should address, especially because you can get one in the Armada. An important consideration with the QX80 is that this has a relatively tight turning radius, so getting around some of these narrower roads here is actually not too much of a problem, even with the flatbed that I have there attached to the back. That's one of the problems I do have towing with half-ton trucks on this particular private road. The other thing that I appreciate is that we have a full-time four-wheel drive system, not a part-time system or a slip and grip style system, so it feels much more sure-footed on roads like this than pickup trucks with part-time four-wheel drive. Now, if you wanted to lock the center coupling, you can do that. I can just tap that 4-high button right there, and it actually locks the center coupling. But of course, then you're going to get binding, and you should only use that on loose surfaces. Interestingly, like the surface that we're on here. But I appreciate the full-time four-wheel drive system because it makes living on gravel roads like this just a lot easier, especially in hilly or mountainous areas when you're towing this kind of weight. I could stop here, I could start off again, I can go slow over some of these water diversion bumps, etc., and not worry about digging up the road. The other thing I'm going to do before we get this out on the road is add a trailer to this system here, so we can dial it in. This one is it's around 26 feet or so from the hitch to the very back, somewhere around there. We're just going to give it a random name here. It has now been saved, and because it's now been saved, it is eligible for blind spot warning. The vehicle will automatically know that the trailer's in your blind spot, but check around the trailer for something else that might be hiding there. We also have an option in this system to assist you with checking your trailer lights, which is a function I definitely appreciate, especially if you're doing that on your own. You can have that extra safety check. Now, out on the road, let's talk about the numbers really briefly. In its own right, this model went 0 to 60 in 6.2 seconds, stopped in 122 feet. The stopping distance is pretty good for something like the QX80. The 0 to 60 time, that's actually a bit slower than I got sometimes in the last generation QX80. And there is one thing to know about turbocharged engines like this. Yes, this has fewer pounds to haul around per horsepower versus the outgoing model and lots of torque, but this also has a torque curve that's very different from a naturally aspirated V8. And so that is going to be a point of contention for some towers out there. Remember that even though this produces a lot of torque at lower RPMs, right off idle, it's actually not producing as much as a big V8 engine does. You actually have to start spinning those turbos up in order to get more torque out of the engine. And that is going to yield a different feel out on the road. You have a lot of stump pulling torque, but it takes a while for that torque to get on the boil. Whereas in the naturally aspirated V8 that this replaces, you had a lot of grunt, basically at 700 or 800 RPM. As we're getting down to this construction zone, let's just go ahead and see how this keeps this trailer under control going downhill. Well, we're actually not slowing down, so that is one of the things I was concerned about. The trailer behind me weighs around 3,600 to 3,800 pounds in its own right. It's not a lightweight trailer because it's a pretty decently sized flatbed. And that is one of the disadvantages to smaller turbocharged engines like this. You just don't have as much engine braking available. Now there is some engine braking, and I think it is a little bit more than we find in the Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer, likely thanks to the displacement of this engine, which is a little bit larger than that 3-liter inline 6. But if you're really trying to control an 8,000 pound trailer in steeper areas, if you live in a hilly area or a mountainous area, you might want to check out one of those GM SUVs because the inline 6 turbo diesel has a lot of engine braking. It's a diesel, and they actually incorporated an engine brake into the design of that turbo, but also the big V8 engines definitely have a healthy amount of engine braking. The Explorer and Navigator, they're largely going to be similar to this QX80. All right, we're loaded up. Let's get the combination out on the road, which is good for about 6,000 pounds on the rear. Again, nowhere near the towing limits of the QX80, but this is the kind of thing that I could see QX80 shoppers towing on a more regular basis. Remember that if you are going to tow 8,500 pounds with your QX80, that you're not going to be able to put a lot on the inside because the tongue weight comes out of the payload of the vehicle. And 8,500 pounds, you're looking at a decent amount of tongue weight, and that's really going to limit the number of people and the amount of stuff you can put on the inside of your QX80. On the other hand, it tows this kind of load really, really nicely. Not just because of the extra power under the hood, but because of the body-on-frame design. And that's one of the reasons I mentioned I would rather tow with this than a QX60. The QX60, yes, it finally got a regular automatic transmission, doesn't have a CVT anymore, but it's a unibody SUV, and I tow with a unibody SUV quite a lot. This is much quieter, and that's because there is isolation between the body and the frame. And that's the main reason that towing with this is much quieter than towing with a Durango, which interestingly has about the same kind of towing capacity as we find in this model. In something like a Durango or a Grand Cherokee or really any other crossover, when you have the hitch in the receiver and it's moving around because this road isn't exactly perfectly level, there are potholes, there are dips in the road, etc., the entire vehicle kind of acts like a sounding board. So especially on a longer distance tow journey, say you're taking that to the national park or to the off-road park or something like that, you're just going to be sitting inside the drum for an awful lot longer. And in here, there's a lot more isolation. Infiniti also does a good job with their trailer sway control system in this vehicle. Having a vehicle like a side-by-side or a car on a flatbed trailer can create trailer sway, and it can also just create a minor oscillation that gets trailer sway systems confused, something that I've noticed in other vehicles, especially, for instance, the Rivian R1T and R1S, oddly enough, with air suspensions. In those vehicles, something like that on the back where you're not really getting trailer sway, the system actually gets a little bit confused and it starts aggressively intervening in corners. The system here in the QX80, it's really smooth and it doesn't get involved unless there actually is a problem. If you want to know everything that there is to know about the QX80, that's in a separate video. If it hasn't released already, it's coming up soon, so be sure and check through the channel for that video. If you want to find us on EV Buyer's Guide, find the podcast, etc., 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 follow those links down there in the comment section and in the description. And as always, you can find us at Patreon, you can become a member. Big shout out to all of our members and all of our Patreon sponsors and supporters. You guys really do help make this channel possible. We have really tried to avoid having the kind of sponsorships and ad insertions that a lot of channels have had to resort to. I can't promise that that is going to last forever because we are looking into more sponsorships, but really memberships are what help keep that from happening on a more regular basis. Ad revenue has been uncertain on YouTube for some time, and the advent of ad blockers and people paying for YouTube premium subscriptions, etc., all that reduces the earnings and helps keep us from creating the kind of content you are all interested in. So thanks to all of the people that support this channel. Big shout out to all of them. Big shout out to you for watching, of course, too. And stay tuned for that other video, or of course, all the upcoming videos here at Auto Buyer's Guide. See all of you later.